Well, hello there, friend. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast, where we help construction executives lead high-performing teams, finish on time and under budget, without all the firefighting and babysitting, so you can lead with focus and control. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. Well, my friend, every once in a while, I stumble across a podcast episode that catches me off guard and really sucks me in. If it does that, I will often listen to it maybe a second time, or I'll go pull the transcript and read through it. Every now and then, however, I listen to an episode that I literally listen to 3 or 4 times in a row, and this is one of these episodes. The podcast is Inside the Strategy Room. It's very fancy. It's put on by the team at McKinsey & Company. And they interviewed Richard Rumelt, one of the world's leading thinkers on strategy, author of Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and a more recent book that I have purchased since listening to this episode called The Crux. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to give you 2 short clips from the conversation that made the biggest impact on me. And then in the show notes, I'm going to direct you to the episode. You should listen to the whole thing. You can also download a very helpful edited version. It didn't have everything that I loved about the conversation, but it had most of it in an edited form of a PDF that came from McKinsey that you can just download. So the first clip here answers a deceptively simple question. What really is strategy? And Rumelt will argue, I think convincingly, that most organizations don't actually have a strategy. They have a lot of ambitions, they have a lot of stated goals, and then they have a lot of PowerPoint slides, and they have a laundry list of priorities. But strategy is something different and something much more practical. So as you listen, I want you to think about your own organization, your own team. So when you're with your other leaders and your teammates, are you really talking about strategy? Or are you mostly talking about what you hope happens? Here is Richard Rumelt.
Certainly the trends over the past 30 to 40 years have been in the direction of bad strategy. I think that it's sort of a social contagion where people are copying what they see other people do. For many companies, strategy has become not quite a marketing tool, but a way of presenting to the board and to the investing public their ambitions. And then they confuse that with actually having a strategy. And some of it is the victory of finance, in some sense, as the language of business, where we talk about shareholder return as the ultimate measure of performance and success. And so then people target that and they say, okay, our strategy is to achieve these results. And that's not strategy. Strategy is problem solving. Strategy is how you're overcoming the obstacles and barriers that stand between where you are and achieving something. It may not be a particular number. So there is this confusion. So a typical strategy session, the CEO will announce certain kinds of performance goals. Well, we want to grow this fast. We want to have this rate of profitability. And maybe they'll throw out some other things about safety and environment and quasi-social political goals. And that's our strategy. Well, wait a minute. That's not a strategy. That's a set of ambitions is the right term. And first of all, I nowadays ask them, what are your ambitions? Let's get it all out. What are all these ambitions you have? And let's understand what your ambitions are. And in fact, if you've got 6 or 7 senior leaders in a room and you get them to talk about their personal ambitions for the company and themselves, it's a big spread. It's not just the shareholder return. There's a bunch of things there. And that's all fine. And that's not a strategy. That's desire. And so the question is, well, can you accomplish all of those at once? Of course not. Can you accomplish any of them? Well, That's the beginning of strategy, is which of these ambitions can we actually make progress on today or in the near future? And then you begin to formulate an action plan to do something, and that's strategy. So this gap between having an actual action and having ambitions is where most bad strategy comes from. It's almost a literary form that has evolved using PowerPoint slides to basically say, here's how we will look as a company in a year or in 3 years. And that's interesting, but it's not a strategy. A strategy is how we will solve the problems that stand between us and that kind of accomplishment. It's hard to make choices. Well, let's call them commitments for the time being. When you commit to a course of action, the left road in the woods instead of the right road, you're leaving behind, you're killing off things that might have been. And that's painful. We like to keep all the stuff in the air. And you can keep your ambitions in the air, but you can't keep all your choices in the air. But you make a choice. You decide you're going to commit your energy to A rather than B. People want to keep lots of things possible. And so they generate lists of priorities. I had a client that had 12 priorities in their list, which violates the concept of the word priority. If you pay attention to English language, the word priority means first. And you don't want to be in an airplane when you hear the air traffic controller say, I'm giving priority on runway 3 to the following list of airplanes. You don't have priority to many. But having this list of priorities is a way of finessing the fact that we don't really want to make a choice about what we're going to do. Or it's also the sensibility that when we do strategy, we have to include everyone. You know, if there's anybody in the company that doesn't get mentioned in the strategy, they're going to feel bad. And so we have to mention all the different roles and all the different activities. I call that the public face of strategy, and that's fine. But it's not the actual strategy. The actual strategy has to be a focus. Ever since strategy became a concept, it has to do with the idea of a focus of strength against weakness. And in business, it's a focus of strength against opportunities or problems. And that focus is essential. If you're not focusing resources on a weak point, and the weak point can be a great opportunity, you're not really acting strategically.
I've seen firsthand a lot of leaders that we get to work with. They are very smart people. They're hardworking, and they have had a lot of success in their career. And many of them get all tied up in knots when we're trying to define strategy, when at its core, in its simplest form, strategy is simply disciplined problem solving. It's about focus. It's identifying what obstacles matter most and then committing resources of capital, talent, and time, which I learned from another strategy guru named Rich Horwath, which you should absolutely follow, and you should buy all his books. And this idea of committing resources, of choosing path A over B, about focus, about a concentration of resources, this is a great segue into talking about this next clip where Rumelt talks about the crux. He says every important problem has a hard nut at the middle of it. And this one difficult issue is something that you have to solve if you're going to make any progress. And if you're not willing to solve the crux, that hard nut at the center, then don't try to tackle the problem. Choose something else. And I want you to listen for that idea, because I can tell you with 3 different companies we're working with right now, on the small end, one of them is a $17 million company, and the other end, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So I don't think this challenge of articulating and then executing strategy is something about the leaders of these organizations. I think it's something about human nature more than anything. So listen to that idea, because I think it's one of the most useful elements of strategy that I've heard in a long time that can be put to use immediately.
So many of my ideas are, in some sense, remedial. I am trying to write about and teach and consult with companies in a way to help them do it better. My own framework said, okay, you've got to diagnose. You've got to figure out what's going on here. And working with companies and diagnosing why strategy was so banal, one of the things is that they're trying to do too many different things at once. And they're not focusing on what is actually critical. And so one of the principles that I expound is the idea of, look, if we're going to expend energy and talent on solving a problem, it better be A, a very important problem, and B, a problem that you can actually solve. There are problems out there we can't solve. Well, let's defer those till next year. And let's work on what we can actually deal with. Now, I haven't yet to find a company that will obey my advice and focus on one problem. They always want two or three. But the idea of the crux is that, first of all, the crux of a climb is the hardest move or the hardest segment. And you practice to get over that crux in order to accomplish that climb. And the advice that comes out of that, the real simple advice is, look, don't attempt to climb if you can't handle the crux. And in business terms or national security terms or nonprofit terms, it's don't tackle a problem if you can't handle the hard nut at the center of it. If you can't handle that, go and solve a different problem. And so the crux idea is that every problem has a hard nut, and you better be able to solve that hard nut before you start saying that's our challenge that we're going to accept. The really successful strategists I've known have this sense for that. They have a sense for what's the crux of a problem, what's the hard nut at the center, can I get through it, can I solve it, and which of these really important problems is worth putting their resources on. The first step that people have trouble with is accepting the idea of challenge-based strategy, that strategy is about challenges. I worked with a group in the government that was across 12 different agencies, and they were trying to develop a strategy for integrating these concerns across 12 agencies. But they came out with a strategy that had 22 different priorities. And I kept saying, well, but you've got to deal with why that's hard. You know, if it was easy, it would have already been done. So what's the strategy? And they couldn't go there. Couldn't go there. Because you don't say we have a problem. Because then maybe Congress won't give you any money. And so you have this, not success theater, but ambition theater and positive theater. And we can do it. But if we're dealing with strategic stuff, we have to deal with the fact that it's difficult. How do we deal with the fact that our technology is not really up to par? That it was great technology for the last 10 years, but now it's not the fastest horse out there, and there's a faster horse. And how do we make that transition? And to do that without saying why it's difficult, organizationally and intellectually and in terms of skills, pretty hard to do. And so you begin to get at what are the obstacles that stand between. Or we've been failing at this for 10 years, but it's important for us to do this. And then you have to say the unmentionable. Well, if you've been failing at it for 10 years and you don't know why, maybe we should be doing something else. There's a type 1 and type 2 era. And the type 1 era is where you don't involve the front lines, the mass of people in the organization. You don't get their wisdom in. And there's a type 2 era where they don't understand what the strategy is. The nature here of strategy, if it is a focused choice, if it is a focus of energy on a critical thing, then it can't be what everybody wants. It can't be a democratic thing where you say, well, everybody gets a little piece of what they do. You see this when you go into nonprofits or small towns. They say our strategy is we're going to paint the benches, we're going to put in a bike lane, we're going to do this, we're going to build this, and they have 25 different things they're going to do, which is fine, but it's not a strategy. It's just stuff you're going to do. So strategy needs to be a focus. It needs to be communicated to everybody. The hang-up is when you're not understanding what's happening in your own business. When you're so disconnected from what people are doing, what their customers are saying, what you're saying, that you lose track of it. And you're sitting there looking at SAP numbers rather than understanding the nature of the problem, the nature of the business. We don't have a good understanding of what's actually happening in the product market competition. Partly because of the success theater. Each business manager, each division manager wants to talk about their successes and their opportunities and how great everything is. So these organizational, cultural patterns are strategic. If you can fix some of those, then you're in a much better competitive position.
All right, friend, those are the two clips, and hopefully you got a taste of the value of this. Again, go to the show notes, download the PDF and the entire article. You'll also see the link if you want to listen to the entire thing. And given all the transformation that is happening and will continue to happen with artificial intelligence, I think technology has really come to the fore, but also all the geopolitical disruption, all the social unrest, and I don't think I'm overstating that at this point. And amidst all these changes, I think all of the things that we want to do on an individual basis that have a strategic component about how we pursue these goals, there is a crux. There's a hard nut at the center. And what does that require? Exactly. Leadership. It requires us to be clear and to remove confusion and to focus our limited time, attention, and resources at solving these hard problems, knowing that there's other smart competitors that are out there that are trying to do the same thing. And for those of you that are listening that are in the lumber and building materials supply side, I've been thinking a lot about compensation, and we work with companies that know exactly what behaviors they need from their sales reps, their business development professionals, but changing compensation plans seem risky, and that has become the crux. And until they're willing to address it, everything else is really working around the edges. So if your organization has been stuck on the same challenge for years, maybe spending more time to really focus on answering what is our strategy, maybe the thing to do is say, should we abandon this? Should we focus on something else? Because if you're avoiding the hard thing at the center, the crux of the issue, you're not going to be able to accomplish it. All right, that's all I've got, my friend. I appreciate you listening to me, and hopefully you learned from Mr. Richard Rumelt. You're owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.